Hi you, and thank you so much for taking the time to click on my video. I truly appreciate that, and welcome to my home in the mountains of Austria. Danke. Now it's fall is fast approaching, or autumn, and this is why I have a turtleneck, because it's becoming a little bit colder, and then eventually winter will be here. Nowadays I'm sort of kind of used to the cold weather, and I just adjust accordingly. It gets easier with time. Now on this video I just wanted to share with you a superpower that I perfected once I came to the West. I know that on my YouTube channel sometimes I have criticized the West. I have criticized some of their cultures that I don't agree with, but I am somebody who tries to be fair at all times. And granted, there are some things that I have learned and that have been helpful in my life from the Western world. Now, when I talk about the West, in this case, I am mostly referring to Europe. I find myself living here, and I live in between Kenya and Europe. I normally go home from time to time, but most of my time in my current life is spent in Austria. So on this video I am referring to Europe and not necessarily America, because I've never lived in the States. And I have to say that I have learned also a few beneficial things in my life from the West. It's not, I'm not the kind of person who only sees the glass as half full, half empty. I also try to see it as half full. I also try to take some of the positive things from a place. And I think I have perfected the art. I am literally going to call it an art. It is such a helpful skill. In my 30s, living in the West, I have perfected the art of being in charge of my emotions. Being in charge of your emotions does not mean that you do not feel. It does not mean that you do not have emotions. It means that you do not make your decisions only based on those feelings or emotions. It means that you have your emotions under control. It means that you can think past the feelings. Keeping my emotions in control. So you know how people say that Westerners are very cold? Like they talk about Africans, we are very warm, we are very welcoming. You come to our countries, it's Hakuna Matata, Karibu Rafiki, like we're just very welcoming. Like I like to say, that is how we were colonized real quick. But that's a different video altogether. On this video, I just wanted to talk about the whole idea of talking about Westerners being very uninviting and cold. So while I was researching, I found this same discussion on Reddit, people talking about that European, quote, snobbish attitude. And some people said it's just a cultural difference, it's just a misunderstanding of the cultures. Quote, German supermarkets checkout, if you expect a nice chat with the cashier, you're up for a rude awakening. You say hello, then your mission is to throw all your items back into the shopping cart fast enough that they don't pile up at the end of the belt. It's a race. Then you say, with card please, pay and make room for the next customer, right? So they're not very heavy on small talk, and some people might interpret that as being cold. Somebody else on the same Reddit discussion thread said American politeness, showing interest by talking to strangers. American rudeness, being cold and distant by not talking to strangers. And then the person compared this to the Finnish, the people from Finland, and he said Finnish politeness minds their own business by not talking to strangers. Finnish rudeness disrespects people's personal space by talking to strangers. So basically pointing out that it might be just a cultural misunderstanding. And if you know me, then you know I am in all sorts of chat rooms and online discussion panels. So this is a different panel, not Reddit. Somebody anonymously wrote, we are not rude, we just don't have a culture of being extremely superficially friendly with random people. And we also don't really interact with strangers as much as Americans do. All the stuff you mentioned isn't that rude, it's normal. But that being said, But that being said, that many people will say you're welcome, hi, thank you, sorry, all that in those situations just kind of depends who you come across. But the people doing what you said aren't being rude though. So basically, a European saying that the rest of the world being very well, not all of the world, but like African culture, American culture, parts of Asia, being all nice to one another, like small talking is basically just superficial, and they don't do that. So again, somebody saying it's just maybe a difference in culture. And on a different discussion panel, a different person just basically disagreeing very strongly and saying that they agree, I agree, Europeans, by they mean Europeans, are cold, rigid, predictable, and racist. I've heard they behave differently and say different things, yada yada. It was a long comment, but basically this person just disagrees with the notion that it's a difference in culture, and they think that they're just rigid, non-spontaneous people. Somebody else said, quote, they don't like strangers very much. And yet another person said, imagine coming from a culture of people that used to rule the planet but currently have absolutely nothing of value to give at present. This was written 1 year ago on a discussion panel. So my goal here is not to agree or disagree with any of those arguments that have been presented online by different people on different chat rooms, different discussion panels, different comment sections of different videos made either on YouTube or elsewhere. That's not my goal. I can only talk about my personal experiences, and what I can say is, as a Kenyan who grew up in Kenya, people are more welcoming on the African continent, in Kenya and even beyond Kenya, because I've traveled on the African continent, than they are in the West. And by the West, in my case, again, I'm referring to Europe because that's where I live. And that's not to say that they are no friendly or welcoming people in the West. Of course they are. Austria, for instance, has a lot of friendly people. I love living in Austria. People actually call them, quote, the friendlier Germans, but obviously they are not Germans. They are their own unique people. And I would say that they are willing to small talk. They are willing to chat. They are willing to compliment a stranger. Like, Austrians are different like that. But at the same time, if I was to compare them to like Kenyans, they will obviously look a little bit more distant and cold because Kenyans again have that African warmth. So I can only talk neutrally, like from my standpoint. Obviously, in the Western culture, I've seen them to be a little bit more distant and cold. Anyways, you have your experiences, but the world sort of like came to that consensus that generally the West tends to have a lot more distant and maybe even snobbish people. And if I was to attribute it to something, I would say maybe it's because of their financial prowess. They have more money than the world that we come from, and therefore it just makes them not need other people. But that's a whole other discussion. Like I said, this is a community of thinkers. You are allowed to think here, you're allowed to have your own conclusions, your own theories. But back to my video. The whole idea of talking about Westerners being very uninviting and cold, which obviously has its disadvantages, but one thing which I will actually controversially call a good thing is how they are able to keep their emotions in check. I know it comes off as a little bit sociopathic when you see how they act when something very grand, very shocking happens. They are not very emotional, and I know that people have written whole articles and have done whole documentaries about them struggling with empathy, and people have pointed to their history as a reference point, like, look at what they did all around the world, like, who does that? And people have, if you're gonna be blunt, people have said that white folks struggle with empathy. I even referenced that in one of my videos. You can go and watch it here when I talked about the difference between working with black people and working with white people, and I said that I have seen it firsthand that they do struggle with empathy. But I also have to point out that in some twisted way, and again, this is very controversial of me to say out loud, but in some twisted way. When you look at their culture that is again not very inviting, inside there are some positive things that you can also extract. For instance, them being very cool and being able to control their emotions in situations where Africans would have freaked out, you know. I have found, let me not even say Africans, let me just say black people generally. I have found myself in situations where when I look at my husband's reaction, he's a white person, and I looked at my reaction. In the moment, it seems like my reaction is the correct reaction because we are humans and we can see what is right in front of us. And if it's like something dangerous or something that could harm you, then you react that way. But in the long run, when you look back, you're like, actually, that white man, in this case, I'm referring to my hubby, had the best reaction, because in the long run, being able to control your emotions, being able to not freak out has its benefits that I guess last longer than the knee-jerk reaction that a lot of us Africans have. My observation is that a lot of Europeans, whether it's individuals or even the police force or the hospital staff, they have this delayed reaction. For a minute there, you don't see them change their facial expressions as quick as, say, people at home in Kenya would have. And you don't see them, like, I don't even have the words for it. Let's just call it a delayed response. For a minute or two there, you notice that there is a little bit of a disconnect to the urgency of the matter. And only until you experience it can you fully understand what I mean. I guess this is why people say that they struggle with empathy, because that knee-jerk reaction of like feeling empathetic to a situation immediately that a lot of black people have, they sort of like lack that. There's a gap somewhere. My words are all over the place because I don't have the terminology for it, but if you've seen it, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. They are not very dramatic people. They do not react, they respond. They wait for time to just pass before they make any decisions. They don't make decisions when they are angry. The whole Kenya, nahama, nikuhama nahama, and taking your bag and just moving out. You know, that's Swahili for like, I'm moving out, just because, you know, you had one little fight with somebody or big fight with somebody. So I have to say that in my 30s, I have unlocked that superpower where I am not very emotional like I used to be. And it is thanks to being exposed to, I guess, white folks, being in the West, and just like it, I guess, rubs off on you and you find yourself not being very reactive. In recent years, I respond and I don't take things too personally, and I am more of an observer, and it has just like made me tick off my to-do list a little faster. You know how in life, I don't know about you, but I know about myself, I always had a to-do list. I knew that I wanted to travel. I knew that I wanted to own property. I wanted to get married. Like, they're just things that you wanted to do in life. And thanks to being exposed to the West and somebody like my hubby, I'm able to just tick that real quick, because even the way I have been doing my deals, where land, for instance, is concerned, I have been very non-emotional, and I have been very more rational, not so, taking things so personally, and I have not been concentrating on things that are not a priority. I have been able to just, like, I guess you call it, act white, and again, this is controversial to say, because I have made a distance between me and certain things and certain people, and that has enabled me to make the correct decision faster. I am not saying that there's anything wrong with taking things personally, being more personable. I have criticized the West throughout my channel. I have talked about them not being warm people. I have talked about them being struggling with empathy. I have said there's a little bit of that in the West, having their nose all up in the air. I will be the first person on the queue to call them out on certain things. But at the same time, I have got to be a realist. right? You can't only point at the pessimistic side of life. You also have to look at the optimistic side of life. You also have to look at the advantages of something. So like I said, inside that bubble of like Westerners being very cold and non-reactive and distant, can you go in there, swim in there, and come out with positive things? Of course, sure, you can. Just like you can find something positive in any other thing in life. So that is a superpower that I have been able to unlock in my 30s. It has made me a little bit more dangerous. I was always dangerous, even when I was, super emotional and super reactive. But this ability to just not react, to just observe, to not say the first thing that comes to your mind, to not show too much emotion, has unlocked even more danger that I didn't know lived inside of me. And I think this is not necessarily being, I hope I can pronounce this right, Machiavellian. It's not necessarily Machiavellianism. A question of, like I said, this is a channel where I intend to provoke thought. So this is not necessarily ideology here. I am not trying to sell you any ideology. I know that somebody watching me might think, are you trying to say that am I selling ideology? The whole, does the means justify the ends, or the ends justify the means? I am for situational ethics. I believe that every situation has its special elements that then shape the ideology. I don't believe that at all times the means should justify the end, or the end at all times should justify the means. No, I am more in the middle. I'm for situational ethics. I am for it depends. So don't watch this video thinking, okay, this woman is trying to sell ideology, that she's trying to influence my thoughts. No, I am actually trying to provoke your thoughts. Are you a very reactive person? Do you just say the first thing that comes to your mind? Are you just very emotional? Do people get to you real quick, like them hands are ready to go real quick? Is it beneficial to you in the long run? Because I know in the short run, it can be very beneficial because you get instant respect. Sometimes you have to put people back into their place immediately. But what happens in the long run? Because people then look at you as a loose cannon that you cannot control yourself, and so people eventually don't really call you to the big boys table because you are not predictable. But if you're able to just move without showing too much emotions, don't play poker with your cards showing, don't just like react because you took offense too quickly. It has its benefits in the long run, and I've seen that in my hubby a lot. He's not reactive, and he has this silent authority that I have really come to like respect, and it has really shaped my view of life. And again, that is, I have to give credit where credit is due. That is mostly because of living with Westerners and just observing how silent power moves, and knowing that not every situation needs an instant reply or instant action or instant answer, right? So I just wanted to put food for thought out there. If it benefits you, you're welcome. If it gives you something to think about, then food for thought for you. Again, this is a community of thinkers. Like I said from the beginning, I am looking to create a channel that is a community of thinkers. If you haven't yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, be sure to do so that you don't miss out when I upload a new video. Thank you for watching. Ciao.